At exactly 1:47 in the freezing early morning hours of January 31st, the surveillance perimeter of the Nancy Guthrie residence went completely, irreparably dark. For months, the public has been force-fed a meticulously sanitized narrative, a desperate son-in-law named Tomaso, pulling off the perfect suburban crime. But buried deep within a highly restricted, encrypted folder retrieved by federal cyber units lies a completely different, chillingly orchestrated reality. Tomaso was not the mastermind of the Nancy Guthrie extraction. Tomaso was merely a pawn. I possess a classified digital artifact, extracted from the absolute deepest, redacted servers of the Pima County Smart Home Network, a time-stamped system log that completely incinerates the official law enforcement timeline. I can only reveal the full forensic weight of this file at the exact end of this presentation, because the moment you comprehend what this evidence truly dictates, you will realize this case hides a monster they never wanted us to see. The mainstream media and the Pima County Sheriff Department desperately want you to accept a very simple, isolated story. They want you to stare at the leaked doorbell camera footage and see a hyper-professional operative executing a flawless infiltration. But I need you to strip away the noise and look much closer at that degraded, grainy footage. Look at the forensic micro-expressions of the man standing on the freezing concrete porch. Watch his extremely rigid posture. Watch the frantic, erratic darting of his eyes straight into the camera lens just seconds before he awkwardly bends down to shove a handful of dry, dead yard leaves over the glass. This is absolutely not the behavioral profile of a cold, calculating mastermind. This is a man choking on raw, unadulterated cortisol and panic. Tomaso was suffocating under $250,000 of debt. He was financially cornered. He was terrified. And he was forensically chosen to be the very loud, very visible public face of a highly weaponized cover-up, leaving us to ask who actually placed him on that porch. For weeks, the public was drip-fed intense, highly curated sensory details regarding this scandal. According to heavily redacted field reports, we were briefed on the recovered internet history, where Tomaso explicitly searched for remote desert drop zones. We were briefed on his late-night cellular pings with his cousin Marcus. The media attention was built entirely around these clumsy, amateur mistakes. But right as the federal case against Tomaso reached its absolute boiling point, a terrifying investigative anomaly emerged from the shadows. Tomaso actually left those digital breadcrumbs on purpose, because the true mastermind explicitly engineered a trail for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to follow. Tomaso was a calculated, sacrificial decoy, meant to bury a much darker systemic secret. The ultimate threat was never sweating on the porch of the Nancy Guthrie estate. The ultimate threat was operating in the digital abyss, completely unseen, executing a sequence of events that began hours before Tomaso ever stepped foot on the property. 3 hours before Tomaso awkwardly tried to blind that exterior lens with dry leaves, a massive digital inferno was already quietly raging. Buried deep within page 42 of the leaked cybersecurity forensics, a chilling entry exists. At exactly 10 o'clock at night, an untraceable administrator logged directly into the Nancy Guthrie Smart Home Network. This unseen entity, a shadow figure we will formally identify as the Phantom, used top-level administrative credentials to intentionally place the primary security cameras into a restricted privacy mode. The cameras were not physically hacked from the outside. They were surgically, quietly disabled from the inside. While Tomaso was hyperventilating through his physical approach, the Phantom was orchestrating a massive, undetectable digital blackout. Insiders within the smart home cybersecurity firm quietly noted these unauthorized administrative logins, and within minutes, massive chunks of active cloud server data began to permanently vanish. An ex-insider from that exact cybersecurity firm recently broke their silence, legally confirming that the 10 o'clock login originated from a masked, routed IP address located miles away from the Nancy Guthrie estate. This was no longer a simple family dispute over a massive financial will. It was a synchronized, multi-tier operation that begs one terrifying question. Who handed the Phantom the digital keys? Right now, across classified digital boards and deep web forensic channels, a massive, coordinated wave of disinformation is spreading. We need to execute a severe retention audit on the current trending theories because the public consciousness is being completely manipulated. Millions of people are currently theorizing that a cartel execution squad was responsible for the Nancy Guthrie extraction. Other massive forums are deeply convinced that a deranged, obsessed stalker targeting Savannah Guthrie orchestrated the entire event. But we must dismantle these theories using pure, cold forensic reality. If a highly trained cartel squad breached the Nancy Guthrie residence, they would have been in and out in under 4 minutes. No hesitation, no lingering. Just a clinical extraction. Furthermore, if the Federal Bureau of Investigation genuinely believed an untraceable celebrity stalker was actively hunting the family, the NBC studio security protocols would have been elevated to military-grade lockdowns. But security at the studios remained completely normal. The authorities did not elevate security because the authorities secretly knew the phantom stalker did not exist. The threat was not a random outsider. The threat was an intimate insider, someone whose true identity is hidden in plain sight. You have to analyze the profound psychological disconnect between the chaotic physical evidence left at the scene and the carefully constructed written evidence delivered to the media. Tucked away in a restricted behavioral analysis file, authorities hold multiple ransom demands asking for millions in cryptocurrency. But the structural linguistics inside these notes completely betray the behavioral profile of Tomaso. Tomaso was frantically querying search engines to discover how long an 84-year-old woman could survive without her specific daily medication. He was a brute force, panicking amateur. Yet the ransom demands were highly poetic, overly complicated, and distinctly feminine in their psychological construction. The unknown author wrote that Nancy Guthrie had perished and was buried in nature now. The author explicitly apologized to the family, stating that nothing could have changed the outcome. A desperate man facing imminent financial ruin and a massive federal indictment does not pause to write a hauntingly poetic apology. The Phantom wrote those notes. The Phantom completely controlled the public narrative, while Tomaso functioned strictly as the disposable, chaotic muscle, a dynamic that exposes a devastating flaw in their communication. The psychological profiling of the ransom text reveals a terrifying, blinding arrogance. Retired federal behavioral analysts have pointed out the excessive use of plural pronouns throughout the text. The author repeatedly stated that we have your mother, and we did not fully grasp her physical conditions. But in one massive, accidental slip-up, the author commanded the family not to contact me. Just one word, one singular pronoun. It shatters the illusion of a massive syndicate. It proves there was one singular architect manipulating the entire board, one person holding all the strings, a person who is currently watching the federal government arrest the wrong man. Right now, a complete systemic isolation is underway to protect that exact architect. Tomaso is locked in a freezing, sterile federal interrogation room, completely silenced, absorbing the absolute brunt of the criminal charges. His cousin Marcus has vanished entirely into the federal holding system. The masterminds behind this operation are systematically executing a total career and public relations blackout to ensure the 10 o'clock digital override logs never see the light of day. The stakes surrounding the Nancy Guthrie investigation have reached an apocalyptic, point-of-no-return level. As this exact presentation goes live on your screen, high-powered defense attorneys are already drafting aggressive legal injunctions to have this forensic breakdown scrubbed from the internet. You are watching Forbidden Media, and what comes next is the exact piece of evidence they are trying to hide. It is time to deliver the classified biometric artifact I promised you at the very beginning of this broadcast. We have to violently overlay the 10 o'clock administrative login with the most terrifying piece of biological tracking evidence in modern investigative history. Nancy Guthrie had a specialized pacemaker surgically implanted in her chest. This medical device did not just regulate her biological functions. It constantly transmitted a steady, undeniable digital handshake to a remote monitoring application on her cellular device. When the porch camera was physically tampered with at 1:47 in the morning, the pacemaker did not stop. It continued to transmit its silent, steady rhythm, beat by beat, log by log. It was not until exactly 2:28 in the morning that the internal pacemaker suddenly, inexplicably lost its secure connection, opening a window of time that changes everything we know about human endurance. That is 41 agonizing minutes of total, unrecorded silence. 41 minutes where Tomaso was trapped inside a dark, locked house, struggling desperately to manage a catastrophic event that was rapidly spiraling out of his physical control. The Phantom had flawlessly disabled the exterior cameras, but the Phantom severely failed to account for the internal medical device, permanently logging the exact timeline of the physical extraction. The Phantom sent Tomaso into that physical environment completely blind to the biometric tracking. Tomaso was entirely set up to fail. Tomaso was deliberately designed to leave catastrophic physical evidence, including the fatal biological splatter located directly on the freezing front concrete steps. And that biological trace tells a story the police are desperately trying to ignore. The biological trauma evidence left on the walkway perfectly aligns with a solitary, panicked amateur losing absolute physical control of an 84-year-old victim. If this were a coordinated professional team, they would have seamlessly controlled the environment without leaving devastating biological traces. No struggle, no noise. Just a ghost in the night. The 41-minute gap is the ultimate forensic proof that Tomaso was operating completely alone in the physical space, frantically trying to communicate with a mastermind who was safely hidden behind a masked IP address. But this raises the most disturbing anomaly of the entire investigation. Why did this highly calculated mastermind choose to strike on a night when the local police force was virtually guaranteed to fail? The final devastating truth connects all these glaring forensic anomalies into one horrifying institutional conclusion. Why did the Phantom explicitly choose to execute this elaborate extraction on this specific night in this specific local jurisdiction? They purposefully chose Pima County because they knew exactly who was presiding over the local law enforcement apparatus. Sheriff Chris Nanos was the ultimate necessary shield for this illicit operation. According to heavily suppressed internal affairs documents, Sheriff Chris Nanos operates a massive department currently plagued by systemic administrative failures, horrific detention facility conditions, and a heavily documented history of compromised internal investigations. The Phantom fundamentally knew that if an extraction happened inside Pima County, Sheriff Chris Nanos would inadvertently destroy the forensic crime scene for them, turning a local police chief into an unwitting accomplice. And that is exactly what unfolded in the bitter cold of that January morning. Sheriff Chris Nanos actively blocked federal agents from taking absolute control of the Nancy Guthrie investigation for 4 crucial, irreversible days. Sheriff Chris Nanos allowed the primary crime scene to remain completely open and entirely unmonitored. Independent delivery drivers, aggressive local journalists, and random neighborhood civilians physically trampled across the front porch with heavy boots, permanently destroying any microscopic physical trace of the extraction methodology. The staggering incompetence of the Pima County Sheriff Department was not a tragic municipal accident. It was a highly weaponized component of the Mastermind's master plan. The Phantom explicitly relied on Sheriff Chris Nanos to botch the forensic gathering. Tomaso provided the loud physical distraction. Sheriff Chris Nanos provided the necessary systemic failure. And the Phantom executed the quiet digital erasure, leaving us with a puzzle that has only just begun to reveal its sharpest edges. This classified reality is just the exposed outer layer of a much larger, incredibly dangerous administrative machine. The deliberate manipulation of the Pima County Sheriff Department strongly suggests that this operation was heavily financed and deeply insulated by a completely different global power player. The investigative rabbit hole does not end with a desperate son-in-law facing a financial crisis. It violently extends into the absolute highest levels of digital surveillance, administrative network overrides, and systemic institutional rot. Tomaso is sitting in an isolated, freezing concrete cell right now, carrying the entire legal weight of a meticulously designed digital illusion. And the person who put him there is still watching the news broadcast every single night. I need you to step back and look at the undeniable totality of the forensic evidence. The 10 o'clock digital administrative blackout, the clumsy dry leaves placed on the porch camera lens, the hauntingly poetic, psychologically divergent ransom demands, the terrifying 41-minute struggle permanently logged by an internal medical device, and the strategic, calculated deployment of a highly compromised local police department. Is Tomaso the ultimate mastermind of this extraction, or is he just a desperate pawn who got completely played by a much larger, unseen syndicate? Type your exact forensic conclusion in the comments below, because I am actively pulling the most disturbing and detailed analytical theories to build the structural foundation for Part 2.